Welcome to Ask Isaac, your weekly video advice column using the techniques of Horary Astrology to answer your most important questions. Today, we have three very interesting questions. The first is, do aliens live among us? The second is, should I leave my career? And the third is, will AI destroy the humanities and the arts? Before we get to these questions, I first would like to say a little bit about Horary Astrology and how I practice it. Horary Astrology is a form of divination using the heavens at the time that the question is understood by the astrologer. So, you send me a question, I open the email, I read the question and understand it, then I cast a chart, and I see, based on the houses and the rulers of the houses, what the answer is. I make a judgment. I use the Regiomontanus house system, as my teacher, Chris Warnock, taught me, and I don't use modern rulerships. But I will use modern planets if they're on a cusp or in an important place in the chart. And other astrologers may use whole sign houses or modern rulerships, and that's fine. Everyone has their own system, and I think that astrology works through the system that you use. So, each to their own, but what I use is a quadrant house system, Regiomontanus, and traditional rulerships, and sometimes modern planets. So, that's how I do it. If you would like your important question answered on Ask Isaac, then send me an email at plantcutting@gmail.com. If it's a good question, I may use it for this show. If you would like to make sure that your question is answered, or if you would rather not have your question and answer blasted all over the internet, then you can hire me as a horary astrologer. Email me at the same place. Okay, so let's get to our first question. This is an interesting question, and I did say that we want important questions, sincere questions, and I think that this is a sincere and important question. So the first thing that we want to talk about in terms of this question, though, is what is an alien, right? So basically the word means a foreigner, somebody from another planet, maybe, an extraterrestrial. And this would be a ninth house question, because the ninth house rules trips to far-off places, higher learning, religiosity, spirituality, and foreigners. So maybe we can use the ninth house for this. But there's another way of looking at aliens, too. And that is as, well, a spirit. And I personally think that there's a good case to be made for aliens being the only way that this very ancient phenomena of spirit contact can be understood in a modern materialist reductionist framework. So we've had fairies kidnapping children. We've had jinn in Arabia. Every culture has some lore of spirit contact. So you can understand aliens as sort of a spirit. And the house for that is the 12th house. So the 12th house rules witchcraft, secret enemies, possession, the unseen, spirits in general. So we could use the ruler of either of those houses as a significator for aliens. In this chart, it turns out that both the 9th house and the 12th house are ruled by the same planet, Jupiter. So if we look at this chart, down here at the ascendant, the AC, we have Taurus. So the ascendant is ruled by Venus, because Venus rules Taurus. So Venus is the significator of the querent, the person who asks the question. And also, I guess, humanity as a whole, because in the question, do aliens live amongst us? The us is the first house. That's humanity. So the aliens are Jupiter, because Jupiter rules the 9th house and the 12th house. So Venus right here is in the 8th house, but on the cusp of the 9th house. And she's not very well dignified, either by sign or by aspect or by angularity. So she's kind of, doing her thing, as humanity does, kind of like in the middle, right? Jupiter is doing rather well. He is in his domicile of Pisces, though he's at the last degree of it. Now, he is actually making an applying aspect with Venus. Well, actually, Venus is making an applying aspect to Jupiter, a square. A square is a difficult aspect, however. When we're looking at a horary chart and we want to have a definitive answer, we will look to see if the significators are applying to an aspect together, right? And lo and behold, right now what we have is the significator of us and the significator of aliens applying in an aspect, though that aspect is a square. And again, that's a difficult aspect. So to me, that means that yes, aliens do live amongst us, but they might not be what we think they are. As you see, Jupiter here is in the 12th house, the house of hidden enemies, the unseen, and spirits. So to me, that's another point that perhaps aliens are just another way of understanding the spirit world. Perhaps. Another meaning of the square and of Jupiter being in the 12th house of the hidden, the unseen, is that we're not going to be able to prove their existence, right? Not to science, not to the world at large, because they're hidden and there's difficulty there. So, there's my judgment. Do aliens live amongst us? Yes, but they may not be what they seem, and probably not going to be able to prove their existence. Okay, so let's get to the second question. I'm going to read it for you. So, I work as an adult trainer in the UK. My area of specialty is employability and well-being. I run community classes to help people get into work or to improve their mental health and well-being. I do this via local charities who secure funding to provide the courses free to those most in need. Over the past few years, there have been obstacles: pay cuts, charities closing down, and funding no longer available during this country's time of austerity. My question is it time for me to leave this career path behind? I have considered and been drawn to working with the elderly and helping those people needing extra support in their own homes with chores and care. Thank you for this question. Now, this is a 10th house question because the 10th house is the house of career. And when we look at this chart, we see that Cancer is rising. That means that the moon is a significator of the querent, of the person asking the question. The moon is right up here in Gemini, conjunct Mars, a retrograde Mars. She's also opposed to the sun. This is the full moon in Gemini, right? That's actually a pretty tough position for the moon. She's also in the 12th house. None of those things are good. So the significator of the querent is rather afflicted, badly. Now let's look at the significator of the career. So her career is signified by the ruler of the 10th house. The 10th house is, the cusp is in Pisces, so the ruler is Jupiter. Jupiter is rather well dignified. So he's in Pisces, but he's in the last degree of Pisces. But he's in the 10th house. Being in the 10th house is great. It's a very powerful place to be in. And even when Jupiter leaves Pisces, he'll still have some dignity in Aries in his terms and the daytime fire triplicity ruler. Ivy Goldstein-Jacobson, in her book Horary Astrology, she suggests that when Jupiter is in the 10th house, or the ruler of the 10th house is in the 10th house, that you should not leave your job. However, I am going to differ with her in this particular case. Now, when we look at the relationship between Jupiter and the moon, we see that there is no applying aspect yet, though by the end of the moon's tenure in Gemini, she will perfect a square with Jupiter. Before she gets to that, though, she's going to have to go through a lot of other aspects, and most of them are very tough. This aspect, the conjunction with retrograde Mars, very tough. The opposition by Sun, extremely tough. So she's going to have to go through many hurdles and obstacles in order to continue doing this job. Also, the aspect between these two planets is a square, which is a difficult aspect. So in order to continue this job, which is a good job, but will also lose some of its goodness because the Jupiter is in Pisces, but it's in the last degree of Pisces, and he's about to move into Aries. So it's going to lose some of his goodness. Well, in order to keep this job and continue doing it, she's going to have to go through more obstacles and probably have less pay. But there's a saving grace in this chart, and it's right over here in the 8th house in Aquarius. It's the ruler of Aquarius, in fact, and the natural significator for the elderly. It's Saturn, and he's making a wonderful trine to the moon. That's a nice trine. She's going to have to go through this conjunction with Mars and this opposition with the Sun before she makes it to that trine. But that's a good trine. That's a good sign for working with the elderly. So my judgment for this would be maybe don't quit your job yet, but definitely go in the direction of working with the elderly, because that's going to be a beneficial thing for you. Okay. On to our last question. This question is from somebody I know who is an artist and who works in higher education, so this is very important to them. The question is, will AI destroy or seriously undermine the arts and humanities? Okay, so this is another question where we're going to have to actually look at the words we're using here and think about them. This is actually really difficult to assign houses to and to actually figure out how to answer this question. Now, the question that she actually asks is about the arts and humanities. And to me, that's a field of study, right? So fields of study, I would say, are 9th house subjects, because the 9th house is higher learning. Art itself is a 5th house subject, because the 5th house is children, pleasure, art, creativity. So books, for instance, are our 5th house. Paintings are 5th house. The works of art are 5th house. Career is 10th house, right? But what she's asking is, will the arts and humanities survive AI? So to me, that's actually a death question. And in that case, it's an 8th house question. So will AI kill the arts and humanities? Now again, this is a very difficult question, but we can just start delineating it. And we can look at it from several perspectives. But to go at it from that way, as an 8th house question, first we'll look at the ruler of the 1st house, which is Mars, because Aries is rising. And then we look at the ruler of the 8th house, which also happens to be Mars, because Scorpio is on the cusp of the 8th house. Well, that actually simplifies things quite a bit, because we have a natural connection between these two houses in the fact that they're both ruled by Mars. Now, Mars is in a pretty bad position. He is retrograde, and he's opposed to the Sun. Now, an opposition from the Sun, this close of an opposition from the Sun, is one of the worst aspects that you can have. Combust would be worse, probably, but it's about the same thing. It's about the same level of bad, right? So Mars is in a bad position, and the sun is a source of life, and the source of life is opposing you. Then that's pretty bad. Also, the sun is in the 8th house, which is the house of death. So, to me, this does not look good for the humanities and the arts. But is AI what kills them? I don't know. Let's look at that sun, right? So the sun rules the 6th house too. Leo is the 6th house cusp, and Leo is the house of illness, employees, the workforce, and the sun is in the 8th house, which is the house not only of death, but of debt. And we know that the academic institutions have really tough situation here in regards to the student loan bubble, in regards to workforce not paying their adjunct professors or their faculty members enough money, right? So without looking at the astrology, we can see that academia is in a tough position in general right now. AI is just going to make things worse. When we look at the arts and humanities, and we look at the kind of jobs that AI is going to take away, that's illustrators, right? Maybe writers, graphic designers. Yeah, those don't look good. That doesn't look good. And maybe the study of arts and humanities in general does not look good. However, arts and humanities are always changing. If you ask somebody from the 19th century, they'd be wondering why we don't learn Latin, because all educated people in the 19th century, 18th century, many centuries, knew Latin in the Western world. Maybe from their perspective, the humanities and arts have already been destroyed. And everything has a natural cycle, so everything is going to die eventually. But you can't kill art. Art is a need for humans, not just to consume, but to create. And in terms of that, you can't kill art. But it does look from this chart like AI may be the final straw for the academic study and the academic industry of arts and humanities. But again, they're not doing so good already. Think of how many famous poets came from an MFA program in the last 50 years. I mean, when I mean famous poets, I mean a famous poet who was read by millions of people or listened to by millions of people. The only famous poets I know of, I mean, there's maybe Billy Collins or so on, are rappers, and they didn't go through the university system. They're connecting with their audience directly. And that's what I see as what the future of art is, again, is connecting with the people who consume your art directly. That's what I'm trying to do right now. Well, it certainly is scary, and I don't want to frighten you, but that is my judgment for this question, at least. Yeah, I would say that the AI will seriously undermine the arts and humanities. Also, when you look at this chart, we see the moon, which is oftentimes a secondary significator of the querent, and also the significator of the action. She's conjunct Mars. They're facing each other, really, because Mars is retrograde, and the moon is moving quickly forward, so they're facing each other and about to be in a head-on collision. That also doesn't bode well. And the moon is also under that opposition from the sun. So there's my judgment. Sorry. But this brings us to the end of our show. And if you have an opinion about these questions, if you have an opinion about aliens living among us, about AI and the future of art, about changing careers in this changing time, please drop a comment below. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and like and share with your friends. And if you have a question, email me at plantcutting@gmail.com. Thank you.